guys, this is Amy here. I'm really sorry that the Unity workshop was canceled last minute last week. I had a little bit of a health concern, so I couldn't make it, but I'm recording this now for you guys so that you can go over this on your own time. Feel free to DM me if you guys have any questions. Basically, I have a sort of starter project set up at this URL, github.com/amyxlace/gemmayhem. And I also have some instructions for what we should do as like a lesson plan. And then in case that this is too easy or you just want a challenge, we can do some extension topics. So for some of the coding aspects, I'll be introducing you guys to some objects or methods that you might not know about previously. And so I highly recommend that if you guys are confused or maybe want some more background information, to use the Unity documentation. This is the main page, but also for stuff we'll be covering, this is the transform description. Here's some character controller collision and some scene managers. So if in this tutorial you find yourself confused at how different methods work, you can come to these links to figure out what's going on. Alright, so to get started, let's download the code. So we hit code here and then download zip. Then once you open it in your file browser, you should be able to uncompress the file, and then you'll have a little folder here. So we can go to Unity Hub, we'll open, and then navigate to the directory where you downloaded the file. So it would be here, gem mayhem main. Let it load for a second. Might take a minute to import some of the stuff that was included in the file. And then it should open up Unity for you. Let's make it nice and big. Okay, so the first thing to note here is that on the bottom here, we have our sort of project panel. It'll show us all the files. So if we navigate to assets, this is sort of all the files that we're interested in for our project. Every team lead will have sort of a different way they organize their files, but generally speaking, you'll probably have different folders. You'll have a script folder, a scenes folder. I have raw files here, but your team might instead have like 3D model file, animation file, materials file, etc. So the way I've set it up, I've put the character prefab in the characters file. I've put some imported packages into the imported file. In raw files, I have a little ding sound effect that we'll use. I have a screenshot for our main menu, and then I have the character model and some animation. In scenes, this is the scene file that we'll be working with, so here you go. In scripts, I have some scripts that we'll be filling in as we go along. And then TextMesh Pro is just some font package that Unity uses. So we can ignore that for now. So next, let's talk a little bit about this scene file right here and how we're going to navigate through the file in the editor. So depending on your keyboard, if you press Option or Alt, you'll be able to enter a mode where you can drag around your scene file. You can scroll in and scroll out to zoom. Yeah, and here it's sort of the 3D grid with which your world lives. On the left side here, it'll be a list of all the objects in your scene. So here, a lighting object, the environment. The environment, you can see this blue box means it's a prefab. It contains a bunch of sub items that all represent like the boxes, the staircase, etc. that you see. There's also, importantly here, the character prefab, which is empty for now, and we'll be filling that in just a moment. So I've been using this term prefab a lot, and basically what a prefab is that it's sort of a definition of a set of objects that's stored in a different file. So for example, if we went to our assets and then characters, and then we clicked on the player Ybot, this is where we're defining our character. Right now I just have like a little capsule here, but we'll be adding a character model later and some other scripts. All of the character attributes will be defined here. So in the scene file, here there's just a reference to the prefab file. So if we modify the prefab file, the changes will show up here. This is better than just putting all of your objects in the scene file and not having them as prefabs, because when you sort of merge changes between two different people, the changes will read as a scene file change instead of a prefab file change, and that may cause merge conflicts that will be very hard to untangle. So I'd highly recommend just using prefabs and keeping as many changes as possible in a separate file instead of in the scene file. to start populating our character prefab, let's go to the character prefab. And then here, right now, as you can see, on the right side here, we have this inspector. It's going to tell us attributes about the object we're selected in. So here, let's select the parent player YBot, and it'll show us a bunch of these components on the right. So first, for every object, it'll show us the transform. The transform is just sort of this object that encodes the position, the rotation, and the scale. So it's important to note that, for example, here we have an object that is the child of the parent. The transform will be defined with respect to the parent, and only at the topmost level are these transforms with respect to the world. For example, if you have like 001 in the parent, but you have 001 in the child as well, that doesn't mean they're in the same position. It means that the child is 001 with respect to the parent, which is 001 with respect to the world coordinates. There are some other components here that have been attached so that I've done already for you. Character controller is a component that comes with Unity. It's commonly used, it's got a collider inside it already, and it's commonly used to specify movement and other sort of basic operations. Here I also have a first-person controller script already. This script has some more specific movement code inside of it. We're going to talk through it in a minute. And then here also, these are the sort of like inputs scripts, so WASD. These scripts are a little bit tedious, so I've just added them here for you. But let us take a look and see what they contain. Okay, so to navigate to the scripts folder, and then open the first-person control script, you'll need to have a text editor or a code editor already installed, so VS Code is a popular option. Yeah, so the first thing to take note here is that it's kind of a scary script. It's really long, but it contains just very simple code for character movement and also camera movement. So the first thing to note here is that at the top of every script, usually you'll have a bunch of class variables. In this script, they've also annotated these class variables with descriptions of what the variables mean. So if you were to go look in your Unity, back in the Unity editor, if you go back to where the component is on the parent object, you can see here that actually the class variables appear here because they were specified at the top of the script with the public access specifier. And then you can see here these tooltips actually appear if you hover your mouse above the name of the variable. So essentially, you can set the values of the variables here at the top of the script, or you can also change them in the editor here, and they'll have this value when you press start. So let's actually put the model into our character prefab. In raw files, we can simply just drag YBot into the prefab. And now you see it appears in the scene. Okay, so now that we've put the model into the character prefab, let's just try it out. Because I've already put the motion scripts and the camera scripts onto the character, it should just work when you press start. Right, so when you press play, you should be able to look around and the camera will move with your mouse movement. You should be able to hit WASD or the arrow keys, and you should be able to move around. There's also, because of the character controller, there's already a collider, so you should be able to like not walk through the walls and stuff. Okay, so now that we have a basic understanding of the Unity editor, and now that we also have our character prefab that can kind of move around when we press start, we're going to go ahead and implement some of the gameplay capabilities. I've called this game Gem Mayhem, but mostly what I mean is that sort of as practice, we're going to load in a few gems into the map. We'll want to be able to collect them, and when you collect them, hopefully we can make them have a sound, like a little ding sound telling you that, oh yeah, we got the gem. Yeah, so let's begin implementing those functionalities. Okay, so let's actually get some like gems into our scene. I've already added sort of this free gem asset pack into our project. So if we go to Gems Ultimate Pack, open scenes, in this demo scene, they're sort of displaying all the gems they have. So we can probably just pick one. I personally like Heart. And what we want to do is we want to make a prefab copy in our own project files. So in characters, I'll just drag this Heart prefab into our folder, and then we're going to want prefab variant because we're going to start adding our own stuff into it. And then here, let's just rename it to Heart gem. Okay, Okay, here in our gem prefab, you can see that the scale is kind of a huge heart, and it's also at an angle. So let's go ahead and fix this here. Let's make this guy straight up, which I guess is minus 90. Here, let's make it 0 and 0 as well. Since it's so big compared in the grid, you can kind of see that it's super big. So let's just make this 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. And then for position, let's just make this 0, 0, 0. It'll disappear from your screen, but if you double click on the heart gem, it'll reappear again. So now if you bring a heart gem into your scene, it will appear at the 0, 0, 0 of the world, and then you can move it to wherever you'd like. So let's go ahead and try like 5, 1. Okay, so I want to give the heart two functionalities. First, I want to give it a little animation where it's spinning, and then also after that, when we walk around and sort of run into the heart, I want to be able to collect it, and then maybe we'll hear a little bit of a ding sound, and then the heart will disappear because it's in our inventory. Okay, so every script in Unity implements this class called MonoBehavior. MonoBehavior has a few methods already inside it that can be overloaded. I've included the important ones here, so start, update, and fixed update. Start is run every time that the object is enabled. To be a little more clear about what I mean, go to the heart prefab and see this check mark. So the gem script is always enabled on this object. So whenever we press start in the game here, start will be called on the script. If for whatever reason the gem was not enabled when we press start, and then later you use some code to enable it, then the start function will be called whenever the gem script becomes enabled. There's also update and fixed update. The difference here is that update is called whenever a frame is rendered, and fixed update is called whenever there's a change in physics. So fixed update occurs more often than update, and so all the physics and rotation movement code should be going in fixed update. How we're going to do this animation is basically I want it to rotate in the z-axis. So to be clear about what that looks like, here in the transform in rotation, rotating in the z-axis kind of looks like this. So as you can see here in the script, I've already declared these rotation angle and rotation speed variables. And you can see in the editor that they have initial values 10 and 10. So we can use these class variables to write our rotation code. So what that looks like is transform, because we're changing the value of the transform, and specifically we're rotating. This rotate method takes in a vector 3 as an argument, so you can see that our rotation angle is a vector 3. And then we'll multiply that by our rotation speed, and then the amount of time that occurs between each frame. And we can get that using time.delta time. So if you wanted to rotate by a different axis, you would then change the value of rotation angle. And if you wanted to make the rotation faster, you would change the value of the rotation speed. So let's go ahead and try running that. And as you can see, the heart is now rotating in the world. Okay, so next, let's add a little sound effect for when the player runs into the gem and picks it up. To do this, the player already has a collider on them from the character controller, but we actually haven't added a collider to the gem yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Here at Add Component, there are a few different types of colliders, but the box collider fits pretty tightly onto the gem, and we're not going to play with any of these. But in order to get a collider to work, it needs to be applied on a rigid body. So let's also add this component. The rigid body component indicates to Unity that this object behaves like a regular physics object, but we're going to modify this a little bit because we don't want our gem to use gravity, so we'll just uncheck that. Now that we have colliders on both the player and the object, the way that the collision works is that once the two colliders detect that there was some overlap between their boundaries, a method will be fired to both the heart collider and the player collider. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to attach an audio source onto either the player or the heart. And the audio source here, you can add a clip of what the audio is going to play. But we have a little bit of a design decision here because we could put the audio source on the player or the gem. I think intuitively speaking, at first I also thought that we should put the audio source on the gem because the gem is logically the item emitting the sound. But if we want the gem to disappear the instant that we collide into it, then the audio source is going to be disabled the instant that we start playing, and so we'll never actually hear a sound. So the correct design decision here is actually to put the audio source on the player, even though that's a little bit counterintuitive. Let's go ahead and do that. Remove component. Let's put the audio source on the player. Add component, audio source. And then let's add the sound effect to this component. So in raw files, ding, let's drag that into the audio clip area. And then one thing to note here is that we don't want the sound to play when the player awakes. So let's uncheck this box. Okay, now that we've decided that the audio source should be on the player side, we should also put our collision code on the player side. So here in our scripts, I've already made a script called gem pickup, and here I've got the sort of pseudocode that we need for the collision. So whenever the two colliders meet on the character controller side, this function will be run with the controller collider hit as an argument, and this argument contains information about the other object that entered the collider. So here I have a quick check to see if the other object was a gem, then we should collect the gem. So to tell whether or not the object is a gem, what we're going to do is take this hit object, get the game object off of that hit object, and then see whether or not it contains the gem component. Because here in the gem, it must contain this script. So in the game object, we can just search for this component. So get component, and then the name of the script is gem. So if we try and get the component and it's not null, then we know that this object is a gem. And if it's null, then it must not be a gem. Okay, so now let's write in the code to actually collect the gem. First, what we're going to do is we're going to get the gem object off the hit information. Now that we do know there is in fact a gem, the hit object actually contains a gem. So game object gem equals hit game object. Next, we're going to get the audio source off of the player. And so audio source equals, and then because this gem pickup script we're going to attach to the player, we can immediately here just do game object, and that will refer to the player game object. And now get component audio source. So what we want to do is we're going to play the audio clip that's attached to the source. Now that we've played the sound, let's go ahead and set the gem to inactive so that it disappears from the scene and it won't leave a shadow anymore. Then let us have just a little print statement to let us know that we've actually collected the gem. Okay, now that we're done writing the script, let's go ahead and attach this to the player object and then run the game. So here in the player object, I don't believe I've already attached the pickup script yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Add component gem pickup. And then let's go ahead, save the game, and then try to play. So as we approach we hear the sound, and so the gem was collected, and now you can see it's totally gone. Now let's just duplicate the heart a few times, just so that there's more than one gem, and we can sort of walk around the scene and play around. Here we can straight up just copy and then paste a few times. They'll sort of paste in the exact same spot, but we can just manually move them where we want them to be. There you go. So if you wanted it to be more realistic, you would sort of like hide them somewhere across the map and then want to run around and collect them, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to leave them here. So now as we go, 1, 2, 3, yay! Okay, as a last step, I'm going to add a main menu to the game, and so I'll show you guys a little bit about how to do UI and scene changes. Okay, Okay, so let's go ahead and make a new scene to put all of our UI elements into. So here in our scenes folder, we can go create scene. Let's just name this menu. Here, this is just a basic empty scene, and we can add a canvas, which is in UI. Here you can right click UI canvas, and that's okay. So the canvas is just this sort of like parent to hold all of your UI elements. As you can see here, the UI will exist in the X and Y axes. Let's first add an image and let that be our main menu. Here we're going to want to add our source image, and let's go to raw files and drag the source image like that. Something to note here is that when you click main menu, here in texture type, you're going to want to make sure it's sprite, 2D, and UI. If you just open a PNG, sometimes it might be default or something else. Make sure it's sprite, 2D, and UI. So here in the image, obviously it's scaled to look kind of poor. Let's make this and then click Option if you're on Mac or Alt if you're on Windows, and then hit this bottom right option here, and it will stretch the image to fit the boundaries of the canvas. Next, let's add a button. So here in Canvas again, we can make a new UI, and this time let's do Button Text Mesh Pro. So Text Mesh Pro is Unity's like new package to support different fonts, and it's a lot better than just the regular mundane button. So yep, let's see. Let's add some text to this button. So here you can see that there's the TMP text as a child. Here, let's add the text. Let's just like press here to play. You can style this button however you want, but as just some basic things, I'm going to make this transparent. I'm going to change the width of it a little bit. So in button width, let's make this 200. Nope, let's make it 300. I'm gonna raise the location of it in the menu. One last thing, so when you make the canvas, Unity will automatically make an event system for you if you don't already have one in the scene. What the event system does is it manages how your input interacts with the buttons and the sliders and stuff. There's a little red sign here. Go ahead and just replace this with input system. This is because I was using a different package for the input, but there's no need to worry about this. Once you sort of address that, we should be able to play. Yay, and now you can see that the image is nice and scaled to our window, but the button doesn't quite work yet. So let's go ahead and add an event handler to actually make the button work. I have a bare bones UI script right here. And this function here will be the button handler. So what we want to achieve when the button is pressed is we want to leave the menu scene and instead enter the game scene we were working on previously. So we're going to use the scene manager to do that. Scene manager.load scene, and then we'll do 1 here. So what this 1 means is if you go to File, Build Settings, this scenes in build list is the list of scenes that Unity will package up when you export your game. So right now there's nothing in my list, but we should add the menu scene, and we also want to add the game scene. So let's go back to our game scene and add this one as well. So File, Build Settings, Add Open Scenes. And these numbers right here, this indicates the order that the scenes are remembered in the scene manager. So here, the scenes game 1 corresponds to the one that we're passing in this argument here. Okay, so now we should actually attach this script to the button and get it to work. So in our menu scene, let's go back to our button. And if you go to the button component right here, this onClick list is empty. This refers to the list of methods that will be run if you click the button. So let's add an entry here. This field right here refers to the object which contains the script, which contains the method that you want to be run. So it's a little convoluted, but what this means is that on our button, we should add the component UI. And then here in the field, we should put our button into this field because our button contains the UI script. And now you'll see that in this no function area, it'll have all the components of the button, which include the UI script that we added. And here we'll want to add our button handler, which is enter game. So now let's see if our button actually works. Yay, and it does. But as you can see here, my cursor is still like totally free, and it's supposed to be locked to the center of the screen, and you shouldn't be able to see it, like I guess a regular first-person shooter. So this is kind of annoying. Yeah, let's go fix that. So back in scripts UI, doing cursor.lock state equals cursor lock mode.locked. So if we play our scene again, now our cursor is locked as we expect it to be. Hey guys, that was everything that is covered in the lesson plan. If you guys want to find the solutions or like a sample completed version of the project, you guys can go to the final branch here and download this code. But other than that, you can try the extension if you want, or feel free to DM me if you have any questions. Thank you guys for watching.